today, and we'll be starting our next quarter next Sunday morning. So it's a good time to jump in if you haven't been coming to Bible class in person. And sometimes people will say, you know, I don't know what you've been doing. Kind of feel awkward coming in midstream or something. Really, any time's a good time to get in. We try not to ever make it feel kind of like, hey, you've already missed half the class or something. And then, of course, the end of a quarter is ideal. So good time to come and get involved. We're looking at this year, though, this idea of breaking free. So in the last 4 months of the year, we're going to be continuing that idea of working on breaking free. And one of the ways that we've been working on doing that is through spiritual discipline. And we've talked about it the whole time, like that discipline's kind of tough, right? It's hard to be disciplined enough to really get to where we want to be. I understand, and I think this is probably true, if you spend about 18 minutes a day, that's there's a rule. I don't even remember the name of this rule or who's credited with this rule. But the rule says if you spend 18 minutes a day on any subject, in the course of doing that, in about a year's time, you will be in the top percentage of people that are skilled in that particular area. So you'll know more about, or be able to do more about than 98% of the people in the area just by spending about 18 minutes a day on any subject. So somebody says, well, I'd love to learn to play the piano. If you would be disciplined enough, that's the key, right? You'd be disciplined enough to spend about 18 minutes a day on that subject. That would get you to the 100-hour mark, and you would be looked at as a great piano player. Somebody said, I want to learn to speak Spanish. Okay, spend about 18 minutes a day on that subject, and over the course of about a year, you will go from being able to order tacos at a Mexican restaurant to being able to place your whole order and even ask for the bill or something at the end, right? In just a little time. Same thing would be true biblically, right? Spiritually speaking, if we would be disciplined enough to do some things on an ongoing daily basis, we will be in a much better position than we would be otherwise. We, if you will, to compare it to physical fitness, will be spiritually fit, right? If we will practice spiritual discipline. This is the book we've been using for a basis kind of for our time together. We haven't read it word for word or anything like that. Some of you have gotten it and mentioned to me that you liked the read and it was a good book. I just wanted to leave this up there for a few extra minutes today, since this is the last time you'll be seeing it. Somebody later on will say, hey, what was that book again? And I'll say, what book? And they'll say, spiritual discipline book. And I'll say, I got to go back and look and remember, right? There's it. There it is. If you want to go back and get it now that we've kind of been over it already and read it for yourself, it would be a good idea to do that. So the suggestions in the book are that we need spiritual disciplines in several areas. We've talked about these already. We need to be spiritually disciplined when it comes to Bible intake. Bible intake is a must, a needed area, right? We've got to be reading our Bibles, taking it in. We do that primarily two ways. Remember what they were? Hearing, listening, and reading. That's right. So that's the two ways that we primarily do that one, and I hope that you're busy doing it. We need the spiritual discipline of prayer. We need to be praying, not just at meal times or as we get up in the morning or go to bed at night, but we need extra prayer time even, right? And it's a matter of the heart that we're really working on there. So prayer is a spiritual discipline. Worship is a spiritual discipline. You got to get up and get here and be involved and actually work at it, right? Because it's a spiritual discipline for us. Evangelism, not only are we commanded to do it, so it's one of those areas that's a command, but we realize that if we practice that command, if we actually do what was commanded, that the results will be we grow too, right? We all of a sudden remember at least one verse for each step of the plan without repeating a verse, right? As a matter of fact, somebody say, yes, faithful obedience is what equals salvation. The faith part of that equation would be hearing and believing. The obedience part, repenting, confessing, and being baptized. By the way, there's going to be a test right away, okay? To make sure you remember a verse for each of those two. Evangelism is a spiritual discipline. We talked about service to others as a spiritual discipline. Does it cost us to do that? Yes. Time, talents, and treasures, and even touch, right? It's going to cost us some things to do that. We talked about fasting as a spiritual discipline. And nobody seemed to be extremely excited about that one, but especially on a fellowship meal day. But fasting is a spiritual discipline that we need to practice. We talked about stewardship as a spiritual discipline, and we talked about silence and solitude as, again, a spiritual discipline. We need to just go get outside and listen to the birds, don't we? To get reconnected and spend some time just meditating on these things as the Bible teaches us. Which brings us to the last two of the spiritual discipline book, and they are active kind of things that we need to do. They are journaling and learning. So these are the two final disciplines that are talked about in the book that we want to share with you today. It's that idea that hey, we're going to actually do more than just like try to take it in, but we're going to do some things that are demanding of our thought processes and of some action that will get us to a better position when it comes to spiritual disciplines. I think these two, by the way, are at the end because it might be what you do with all the others or keeping up with the others. Okay, now that you know what they are, journaling and learning, could we journal about Bible intake? What might we journal? My scripture reading today was Psalm 23. I especially like the verse that said, "Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies." Right? Somebody else writes down, "I love the idea of having my head anointed with oil." Somebody else said, "I like the fact that he's with me through the valley of the shadow of death." So we can journal about it, right? Can we journal about our prayer? Yes, as a matter of fact, we encourage you to do that. We encourage you all the time to have a prayer what? List. Yeah, have a prayer list, right? And what's that prayer list maybe? Especially if you write it with your hand. A reminder of what we specifically are praying about, right? Can we journal about worship? Yes. As a matter of fact, if we inspect your journal, it should say something like this: Brother Philip's sermon was maybe the best I have ever heard today. No, I don't. It doesn't really have to say that, right? But what it might say is something like, "Hey, we studied about the fruit of the Spirit. This day we talked about peace, and here's what I remember," right? Evangelism. Yeah, I'm doing a Bible study with John Doe. He lives at 123 Main Street in Marianna, Florida, and some notes there, right? Could we journal about serving? Yeah, I had the opportunity to pick up a hitchhiker, whatever it might have been, right? Hey, I have a fast planned. I'm going to break the fast with just strictly fruit and bread or water, at the end of this fast. I'm going to the store this afternoon. That's on my grocery list, right? Stewardship, same thing. we're giving this, we're doing that. My silence and solitude, I meditated 20 minutes a day. I set a timer. You just are keeping up with kind of what we're doing here, right? So the teaching then is that this spiritual discipline of the Christian life really needs to be somehow kind of like tracked, right? Now, is it a necessity that we track every aspect of it? Probably not. As a matter of fact, we probably get to a place where we can say, hey, I don't have to write this down as much as I once had to, right? But writing it down and learning it is important. The Bible even says that David, when he was the king of Israel, remember when he was the king of Israel? For several years, and one of the things that he was told to do by God himself was, while you're on your throne, make your handwritten copy of the law. What's God telling him to do? Journal. Spend some time journaling and learning, right? As a matter of fact, when we write it down, does it help us to learn it? Yeah, that's why your elementary school teacher used to make you write your spelling words 3 times each, or 5 times each. There's some mean teachers, by the way, in our group here. Miss Pat saying 3, that ain't even enough. You need to write it like 20 times each or something. So we remember that. Why do you do that kind of thing? It helps you to learn and remember, right? So journaling is important. As a matter of fact, let's talk about it a little bit, just to make sure we understand what we're talking about here, okay? Journaling really clarifies or helps me to think through my thoughts and the growth process that I'm in, right? So writing down the reflections, prayers, or spiritual insights helps us to kind of organize and track where we are with God. So what I have that I use, and you can use all sorts of things, but I use a old school calendar is my journal. I do have some additional journals that I kind of use that are sermon journals, okay? Sometimes I try really hard, by the way, just to walk up front with nothing in my hand but my phone, and somebody sometimes says, what's he doing with his phone in his hand? Well, it's because I run my timer on all of every time I'm in front of you, okay? It's laying there with a timer running. So that when you see me walk up to the front with that in my hand and the clicker in my hand, that's what that's about. But this is what I use as my journal. And I do all kinds of things in my journal. I'll stick notes in it. I'll stick things in it. I just kind of keep a track of what's happening. I sometimes will staple a receipt in there of some sort or do something like that. I'll draw some really cool pictures in my journal. And some of us that like to draw or doodle, that's what my wife says it is. It's doodling. It's not actually drawing. But some of us that like to do that kind of thing, that kind of helps us think through maybe something that's going on that day. And so I'll do some of those kind of things and just make a note of like what scripture I read or what verses I did that day. It's not a very detailed journal, okay? It's not a step-by-step thing. But it does include things like if somebody's in the hospital, that'll be on there, and a reminder to pray about that or to pray for things. One day I drew a picture of a retort and a body going in the retort, and it said, "I'm retorted." Is what I wrote there. So it's just different things every day. But the idea is that it kind of helps me to just think about where I am, what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, right? And to make sure that somewhere on my day calendar, God has been included. What if I get to the end of the day and I realize I hadn't even made a single note today about anything to do with spiritual disciplines. What should I do? Stay awake long enough to do something to be able to add to the list that says, hey, this is what I did that was a spiritual discipline kind of thing. That's important, isn't it? To do something that helps us in our pursuit of heaven. So maybe it's something like that you get. Maybe it's a note on your phone. Maybe it's a reminder on a board somewhere. Maybe it's just a simple note or two. But journaling is that thing that helps us to capture the lesson that you might otherwise forget. Okay, that's what we're hoping to do here with the journaling part of this, is we're capturing that lesson that I otherwise would forget. A buddy of mine said to me the other day, I wrote it down on a note, but the problem was I didn't remember where I stuck the note. That's right. I didn't remember where I stuck the note. And so, you know, it's that kind of thing. So you may need to have something that like you can keep up with easily, right? But have a place where you're writing down the things. That's also, by the way, why in this series that we're doing right now is the first time, like in the last couple of years, that we hadn't given you a handout for a series. But most of the time we give you a handout for lessons, like on Sunday morning sermons, right? I hope you're maybe taking those and punching a hole in them and sticking them in a journal somewhere, something like that. That could even become your journal, couldn't it? Like, hey, here's the lesson that we worked on this week. And then you can put a notebook piece of paper in there that says, hey, this is what I've done with this, right? Or an additional page to add to it. And then you got a little spiral notebook or a little 3-ring binder of some sort that has all of those things in there. But the point of journaling is to clarify the thoughts on growth, is to capture that lesson that I might otherwise forget. Journaling is a record of God's faithfulness to me. Journaling helps me to be spiritual minded, right? It helps me to think, okay, what is it that I was praying for, and what was the results of that prayer? I've mentioned to you before, and I tell our elders this all the time because those guys make the announcements a lot of times, that we need to make sure that we not forget to announce when prayers are answered, right? Sometimes we'll get a person on our prayer list and they're on the prayer list for a long time. That's okay. And maybe that prayer is answered with a transition from life to life even, right? Somebody gets sick and dies. Well, that too is an answer to a prayer, right? But what happens a lot of times is we'll pray for somebody or something. It'll come true or it'll happen. The person will get better. I look over here and see Raymond Copeland. Remember when he had COVID and we thought he was about to die and prayed that he'd get better, and there he is. Well, if we forget to say, hey, this is something we've been praying about, and then here's God's answer, have we done a misservice maybe to God? See, I think we need to make sure that we recognize those things, right? So maybe our journal is a good place to do that, where we can look back and we can see how God has answered prayers, how He has guided our decisions, how He has shaped our character. As a matter of fact, many of us would say, I look back on it, talking about life, I didn't know it at the time, but I look back at this particular thing that happened, and I see God's hand all over. You heard somebody say that kind of thing? Write that down so you can remember it. Okay, journal about that, because this will help us to see those kind of things. I have been guilty of that even. As a matter of fact, we think something in life is terrible and it's a tragedy, and it's certainly not what we wanted or what we had in mind, what we had dreamed about. But you look back a year or two later and you say, thank God that it happened that way and got me to where I needed to be, and out of that situation and into this one, right? So maybe writing those things down help us. As a matter of fact, our journal can also be a tool for self-examination, right? Again, if a page is blank, doesn't have any spiritual kind of things in my journal that day, or that week, or that month, could it help as a tool of self-examination? It might be that I just hadn't been journaling, and so then I say, well, okay, my self-examination is that I just haven't been writing it down. I've been doing the Bible reading, but I just hadn't written it down. So I need to catch up and get back on the plan. Or it might be that I look at my journal one day and say, I cannot believe it. I have gone all week and hadn't opened my Bible. Get back on track, right? Journaling makes it easier to evaluate where I am with my spiritual health and it really can be a place too where I can confess things that I need to confess, right? Did any of you have a diary as a little kid? And you'd write some confession down there? I think so-and-so has really cute eyes. And what are you doing there? Well, you're confessing your love for that person, right? What if we use our journal to say, I struggled today with this particular area. I talked to my buddy, whoever that is, the person that you talked to. I talked to Kelly about this thing, and we prayed together. He understood. He didn't overreact. He talked to me about this, and the same was true from me. We prayed about it. We're on a good shape to move towards tomorrow. And of course, this is an area where we can note areas that we are needing to discipline ourselves in or to be more responsible for as well. The fourth thing I'll tell you about journaling and learning is that if we'll journal and look at things clearly and kind of write it down, have a plan, a written plan, it helps to strengthen us in some of the other areas of spiritual discipline. Again, it helps to strengthen our biblical intake and our prayers, maybe beyond any other. Because as we write notes about scriptures and we record prayer needs and we keep up, we just track that stuff, I'm telling you, it'll make a difference in your spiritual life. If you'll just kind of keep up with that stuff. When you start doing that, you will see an amazing transformation in the way you pray and about how easy it is to remember to call and check on somebody or do those kind of things that we need to be doing as brothers and sisters in Christ. The fifth thing I'll tell you is this. Learning should be, I think must be, and is a lifelong discipline. There was a guy this past May who was 92 years old, who graduated from a college with a doctorate degree. A lot of 92-year-olds would say, whew, that's too much for me, right? Here's what had happened with this guy. He had gone to college initially, and war broke out while he was in college. So he got drafted, and he went and fought in war. He served then for a lifetime, really, in the military. He retired from the military, worked as a contractor, and while he was working as a contractor, he had finished up a bachelor's degree and then even a master's degree because the people that he was working for were kind of pushing him to do that, right? So then he had retired again and had nobody really pushing him, but his wife and his children had said, just kind of in passing almost, hey, you ought to go on back and get your doctorate degree. You like studying so much. He was one of those kind of guys that, was just always curious about stuff and wanted to learn what he could. And they said, you ought to go back and and get your doctorate degree or something. And he said, I might do that. So he had started on that process. He had done a few classes and had gotten to the point where it was time to do a dissertation. That's like a big, massive book report. Some of you hated to do like a 5-page one. This is a massive one, okay? And his wife had gotten sick and died. Does life happen around you when other things are happening too? So his wife had gotten sick and died, and it kind of took him away from what he had wanted to be doing, and he just kind of never got back to it. So then finally, after almost 20 additional years, he goes back over to the school and says, hey, I'd like to finish it. He had been teaching, by the way, at this school, Ambridge University up in Montgomery, by the way. This is a guy I actually know personally. His name is Lawrence Barkley. Doctor now, Lawrence Barkley. He said, I'd like to finally finish this thing. You think that might be possible? And they said, we do. You've met all the requirements except for submitting your dissertation and defending your project. He said, I'll finish this thing. And at 92 years old, finally finished. I don't know what kind of things we might want to work on or what we might want to do, but learning needs to be a lifelong kind of thing, doesn't it? Let me encourage you not to stop learning. Don't say this anymore. Some of us have been guilty of saying this. I just cannot memorize a Bible verse like I used to. Is it harder? Probably. Probably in some ways it may be harder to memorize a Bible verse or those kind of things. But could we do it? Yeah, we can do it. So journaling and committing to learning might help us in that process. So Christians are called to grow in wisdom. We are called to grow like Christ did, right? How did he grow? In stature and in favor with God and man. The other word that's missing there, and in knowledge. So he continued to learn. He set that example, right? So what do? Well, we read books, we read scripture, we pay attention to theology and church history. We find those areas that are interesting to us. You don't have to be an expert in every area. You don't even have to speak Greek or Hebrew, although it might be that if we had a Hebrew expert in the audience, could it help our classes? Man, I think it could. Right? It could enrich what we're doing and help us. And so it may be that there's some area that you say, that's very interesting to me. Bible geography is interesting. Maybe I'm going to all these places around the world. I want to find out what churches were there and what churches are there now and what has gone on in those areas. I don't know what areas that might interest you, but learning should be a lifelong endeavor. I think probably in a lot of areas in life, but certainly when it comes to spiritual things. Don't stop learning. Learning also then will help us not only with our Bible intake and our prayer, but it'll expand our worship and our service, won't it? If we learn more about how do we serve, how do we do this, it'll help us to serve better. It'll make it an easier process for me to go and to help and to serve. Is service a learned skill? I think it is a lot of times. You get better at doing it, right? You get better at serving. Now somebody says, well, sometimes it's just simple as actually like getting out of your car and going and doing it, right? And there's some truth to that. But if we get out of our car and we have the knowledge and the know-how to really make it work, that makes a big difference. And so we're worried about and thinking about this idea of helping us to know how to do things. Knowledge equips us. See, learning equips us to teach, to grow in discipline, and to serve others with confidence. As a matter of fact, I can't tell you how many times people have been hesitant in evangelism and said something like this to me: I just don't know what to say. Or I'm afraid they might ask a question that I don't know the answer to. Well, learn the answer, right? Write it down in your journal. Be ready for the discussion. Discipline, not legalism, is what we really need. Journaling and learning are not rules for righteousness, but instead it's a pathway to godliness. It's a tool, right? It's a tool to use. There are a lot of folks that need to work on discipline, spiritual discipline. I told you, I think last week, where I learned of this book, and Brewer was in a little group that was studying through this book, and he brought it to me and said, hey, you ought to read this book. This is a pretty cool book. As a matter of fact, he was responsible for teaching one of the chapters in the book himself, and he said, hey, would you help me to like kind of organize a thought process through this? I said, man, this is great. We ought to use this ourselves. Spiritual discipline is one of those areas that I guess maybe some of us were hesitant to even talk about. But is it needed? Definitely. Is it something that we can do? It's a must. Let me show you one final verse. In 1 Timothy chapter 4, I want us to read verse number 7. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse number 7. Somebody turn over there and be ready to read for us. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse number 7. Not everybody all at once. Now, what's Paul saying to Timothy? Don't just listen to old wives' tales. Don't let people just tell you what you ought to do and suggest things. Hey, this is the way we do this because we've always done it this way. Don't just get caught up in that stuff, but instead do what? Exercise yourself unto or for godliness. I am challenging you today to practice spiritual discipline. And if we'll do it, it'll change our life. It'll change our church. It'll change our growth, and it'll change everything about what we're doing if all of us will practice spiritual discipline. So I challenge you. Like a little kid, right? I dare you. Somebody say, I double dog dare you. Try it and see. It'll make a difference for here and for eternity. Thanks for being in Bible class this morning. We appreciate you very much for coming. Encourage others to come with you again as we transition to the new quarter starting next Sunday. Of course, the quarter starts on Wednesday night, so that'll be actually our first time that we'll be together. We're doing foundational stuff on Wednesday nights. Encourage you to be here for that. 6:30 is our Bible class time. And then next Sunday, I'll have another book for you. That's a good one, I think, that I hope will be an encouragement to you, too, that we'll study through together. Thanks for being here. Make sure you check in, by the way. That logo's there on the screen. Check in on that. Put any prayer requests you have there. Any other suggestions for Bible classes or things that you want to study? We're also interested in that, so be looking there. If you especially liked, and we're going to give you a survey to actually do next Sunday, but if you especially liked any of the summer series speakers, while those names are still fresh on your mind too, let us know that in the comments there. We want to know who to rebook for next year and who to replace and those kind of things. So we want your opinion on that. And if you're serving today, make sure you check in, okay? So, man, if you're on our service list, check in. And greet visitors and other folks. Don't run over him all at once, but I see Ronnie Newberry in the lobby even, so you probably want to hug his neck. Thanks for being in Bible class this morning.